You've heard the wind howl through the trees, haven't you, little one? But sometimes it isn't the wind, not truly. Sometimes it carries something far older, something older than even the oldest stones you see scattered along the mountains. Something that doesn't belong to this world, yet lingers quietly, just at the edge of sight and sound. I first encountered it, well, it was long after the world had gone mad with war. The guns were silent, the bombs had ceased to fall, yet in some places, the darkness remained. It waited. Blackwood Valley was one of those places. Nestled deep in the folds of the forest, away from roads and towns, it was a village that had survived the war by a thread. Its church, once tall and proud, lay in ruins. The bell tower had crumbled, the bell itself gone, or so people thought. But, my dear, some nights, when the wind shifted just right, I would hear it, a bell, tolling, ringing, and yet no church stood to call it forth. It sounded hollow, as if the air itself had learned to sing a note of despair. I remember the first time I truly noticed it. I had been sitting by a fire, trying to read letters from home, the air crisp and sharp with the bite of approaching winter. The letters whispered of friends lost, of towns burned, of silence. But then, a sound cut through the quiet. A deep, sonorous chime, soft at first, almost polite, then stretching longer and heavier with each toll. I froze, every nerve in my body alert. The fire flickered, and shadows danced like living things along the walls. The wind rattled the window panes as if agreeing with the bell, and I realized this was no ordinary sound. This was something old, something patient, something that had waited through centuries, through wars, through the slow decay of men. I want you to imagine it, little one, the sound that should not exist, echoing over a village that had no church, no bell tower, nothing to ring it. And yet it rang, clear, sharp, mournful, a sound that stirred something deep in your chest, something that said, listen closely, or regret it. That was when I knew Blackwood Valley held secrets, secrets that could not be seen but could be felt, and that bell, it was the first messenger, the first warning. And tonight, I'm going to tell you all about it, about the valley, about the bell, and about why some things should never, ever be sought. So hold your blanket tight, little one. The story begins in the cold shadow of a forest, long after the guns fell silent, when the bell rang with no church to call it, and the forest listened. It was 1947, little one. 2 years after the guns fell silent, and yet the silence itself carried a weight heavier than any artillery could leave behind. Blackwood Valley, once a thriving village tucked between the mountains and the forest, lay in ruins. Roofs were burned black, walls toppled, and streets cracked open like old wounds. Snow had begun to reclaim the village, softening the horrors of the war, but the shadows remained. Most of the villagers had fled, or they had died in the bombings and raids that had scarred the land. I remember walking down what was left of the main street, the cold biting at my fingers through threadbare gloves. Empty carts, overturned barrels, shattered glass glittering faintly in the snow. The wind moaned through the ruined chimneys like a sorrowful voice, and every step I took echoed against the hollow shells of houses. The church. Oh, the church. That place where generations had prayed, where my family had knelt for safety and guidance. It was nothing now but rubble and charred wood. The bell tower had collapsed during the final bombing. The bell itself was gone, or at least everyone thought so. And yet, little one, some nights people whispered that they heard it. The bell, tolling, its sound clear and deep, resonating across the frozen valley. A bell that had no home, a voice with no tongue. They said it began at midnight, when the fog crept through the trees and swallowed the village, and it would ring, over and over, not in rhythm, not in melody, but as if it were calling, warning, or demanding. Some villagers left offerings at the ruins, old coins, bits of bread, or candles half buried in snow, hoping to soothe whatever spirit might linger. Others simply fled, unable to bear the sound. I remember one evening, trudging through the fog-laden forest path that led into the valley. The air smelled of smoke, ice, and something acrid, almost sulphurous, lingering near the ruins of the church. I paused, and I thought I heard a voice, a faint whisper beneath the tolling. "Listen," it said, though no lips moved. I shivered, the bells tolling, reverberating through my chest. Walking through the abandoned village was like stepping into another world, a place caught between life and death. The snow muffled sounds, yet the bell echoed endlessly, unnatural, impossible. Sometimes I would swear I saw shadows moving at the edges of the fog, watching me, retreating when I looked directly. It felt alive, as if the village itself was breathing, holding secrets that humans should not uncover. And that was when I realized, little one, that the valley was more than ruins. It was waiting for someone to hear the bell. Waiting for someone to walk its streets, to seek the answers that had been buried beneath rubble, beneath snow, beneath silence. Not everything that survives a war is human. Some things linger. Things older than time, waiting, tolling, and watching. That bell, the one that rang with no church. It wasn't just a sound, it was a signal, a herald of something that would not be denied, something that had outlasted the destruction of men. And I heard it, and I walked towards it. I remember that evening as though it were etched into my bones. The valley was quieter than I had ever known. Even the wind seemed afraid to stir too loudly, and the snow under my boots was soft, muffling every step. I had wandered down the ruined streets, past houses where families had once lived, past the remains of the bakery with its scorched oven, past the church where nothing remained but rubble and frost-covered stones. And then I heard it. The bell. Not the kind that hangs in towers, calling people to pray, but something older, stranger. A tolling that vibrated through the air and through my chest, like the pulse of the earth itself. It wasn't regular. It wasn't music. It was almost speaking. Yes, I swear it spoke. Each toll seemed to whisper secrets just at the edge of understanding. I froze, trying to pinpoint its origin. There was no tower, no metal suspended anywhere. And yet, it told. For hours I followed its sound, stumbling over snow and rubble deeper into the village, towards the forest edge. That's when I first saw them. The shadows. They weren't people, not fully. They moved just beyond the corner of my eyes, dark shapes, taller than men, stretching and swaying, almost breathing with the fog. I thought my mind was playing tricks, and yet I knew they were real. And they were waiting for someone to hear the bell, waiting for me. I remember finding the bell itself, though it was nothing like you would expect. There, in the center of the village square, among the remains of what was once a fountain, was a fragment of bronze, blackened and twisted from fire, yet somehow resonating. Each time the fog shifted, I could swear it pulsed like a heartbeat. I dared not touch it, but the moment I turned away, the tolling followed me, bending around corners, echoing through trees, through broken windows, through the snow. I was not alone. Footsteps that weren't mine crunched softly in the snow. I could feel them behind me, circling, yet when I looked, there was nothing but fog. Then came the whispering. Low, a chorus of voices just at the edge of hearing. They spoke of promises broken, of souls lost, of warnings. One voice, clear and cold, whispered my name. I stopped, and then it whispered again, "Come closer. Open the way." I should have turned and run, but something rooted me in place. Fear was there, yes, and my heart pounded like a drum, but so was curiosity. Something deep inside me knew I had to see it. I stepped forward. The fog parted, and the tolling. It grew louder, louder than anything natural, until it was all I could hear. Then just as suddenly, silence. And in that silence, I felt it. A presence, watching, waiting. The shadows pressed closer, yet not threatening. Not yet. It was as if the village itself had become alive, a creature made of ruins, snow, fog, and memory. And the bell. The bell was its voice. That night, I did not sleep. I walked the streets until dawn, listening, watching, understanding, if only a little, that some things endure, that some echoes of war are not just stone and fire, but something far older and far less forgiving. Not long after the war ended, I first heard it. I was walking through what remained of the main street, just past the old bakery, the one with the roof that had caved in. The wind was sharp that night, slicing through the skeletons of houses, and I heard it. A bell, but no church, none. Not a single bell had hung there for years, and yet there it was. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks. Maybe a fallen metal shutter clanging in the wind. Maybe a branch. But no, this was different. It was deliberate, heavy, deep, mournful. I followed the sound, careful not to slip on the ice. The snow muffled my own footsteps, yet the bell seemed to grow louder. Closer, yet impossible to find. Through the fog, I saw movement, shadows that weren't just shadows. They watched me. I remember gripping my coat, feeling the chill of the air, but not the cold on my skin. A cold that came from somewhere else, from below, from inside the earth itself. And then I saw it. The outline of a figure at the edge of the forest. Tall, impossibly tall, with a hood, or maybe a shadow that wore the hood of some long-gone monk. It didn't move like a man, but it moved. and with it came the tolling, as though it carried the bell with its breath. I froze. My heart. I can still hear it in my ears, like a drum, the only thing louder than the bell. You see, it was that winter. The snow had fallen deep and soft, swallowing the ruins in silence. I had gone out to fetch water from the old well, the one that still had ice frozen across its mouth. The valley was quiet, too quiet, and yet there was a sound, a bell. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks, as the ruins can do. But no, the sound came again, clear, mournful, ringing through the empty streets. I remember pausing on the cobblestones, my breath misting in the frigid air. There was no church, no bell tower, just the ruined square and the skeletal walls of houses long abandoned. And yet the bell rang, slow, deliberate, as if someone or something was calling out from beyond the world we know. I wanted to run, but something held me there. Fear, yes, but also curiosity. And when the bell tolled for the third time, I saw it, a shadow moving along the far edge of the forest. I couldn't make out its shape at first, just a dark flicker between the trees. But my heart knew. It was waiting, watching. And somehow, it was linked to that bell. I followed the bell's sound toward the forest, though every instinct in me screamed to turn back. The snow was deep, each step a struggle, and yet the sound drew me on, relentless. Then I saw it, a shadow, taller than any man, slipping silently between the trees. It didn't walk. It moved like the darkness itself, folding and stretching as if it were alive. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel its gaze, though I could see nothing. And yet, I knew it was waiting for me to notice it. I whispered to myself, hoping that speaking might anchor me to reality, to the world I knew. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaking. The forest answered with silence, and then the bell tolled again. Only this time, the sound wasn't coming from the village square. It was here, with me, as if the shadow carried it. I could feel the air thicken, the cold deepening. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My feet were rooted, my mind suspended between terror and fascination. And then, the shadow vanished. Not into the trees, it simply disappeared, leaving nothing but the echo of that bell and the whisper of snow under my boots. I never forgot that night. And I never told anyone. Until now. I remember the first night I heard it clearly, the bell. I thought, at first, it was a dream, or the wind. But the sound, it had weight, purpose, like it was calling someone, or warning them. I stepped out of my cabin, lantern in hand, and I swear the snow seemed to hush itself, as if even the forest feared it. The ruins of the village lay silent, yet somewhere deep in the fog, the bell tolled again. Not once, not twice, but a sequence, irregular, like a language I could almost, but not quite, understand. And that was when I realized. This bell, it didn't belong to any church. It didn't belong to us. It belonged to something older, something waiting. I followed the sound of the bell through the ruins, my lantern cutting through the thick fog. And that's when I saw it. A shadow, tall, impossibly tall, moving in the mist, its outline bending unnaturally, like the fog itself had taken shape. It didn't move like a person. It glided, silent, yet somehow deliberate. And as it passed, the bell tolled again, closer this time, yet there was no bell tower, no rope, no metal. Nothing but the shadow and that voice of iron and chill. I froze. Every instinct screamed to run, yet I could not. Not until I understood that the bell wasn't just a sound. It was a warning for someone, or perhaps for everyone. I followed the echoes deeper into the forest where the village ended. That's when I saw it. A bell, not hanging in a church, not attached to anything that made sense, just suspended from the limb of a tree, swaying slowly as if moved by an unseen hand. And the sound, oh, the sound. It wasn't just metal striking metal. It was voices, screams, memories of every soul lost here during the war, calling, crying, warning. I reached for it, but my lantern flickered violently, and I knew then that some doors, some sounds were never meant to be opened by the living. Yet, curiosity, stubbornness, or perhaps fate itself, compelled me to listen closer. The whispers grew louder, calling names I didn't recognize, but some I did. I felt them moving around me, circling. I realized then the bell was a beacon, not just of sound, but of attention. Whatever haunted Blackwood Valley was awake, and it knew I was here. I could feel their eyes, their sorrow, their anger, pressing against me from every direction. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. It was as if the forest itself held me there, listening, waiting. And then it rang, not gently, not like a church bell. This was raw, powerful, alive. Every toll brought memories of the lost, the pain, the fire, the war, compressing time into one moment of sheer dread. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the lantern. I understood then. The bell was never meant for living ears. And yet, I could not turn away. It called for me, and I listened. They moved closer, pressing, whispering, demanding. I could see them now, shapes of men, women, children who had died in the ruins, their eyes hollow, endless. And yet, I remembered something my father told me after the war. Never let the dead feel your fear. Show them respect, but never obedience. I shouted their names, promised to remember, and slowly the pressing, the calls began to fade. The bell still rang, but the voices softened, like a lullaby turned mournful. I left Blackwood Valley that day, and I never returned. The bell, it still waits somewhere for the living who would dare hear its call. Remember this, my child. There are doors the world will leave unopened, and some bells that should never ring. But the past, it always lingers. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you might hear it too.